Hey biomed students, I am recording this video because I have a feeling that the internet is going to be kind of patchy on Monday, March 1st. So if it is, you'll have this video to look at and you can still do the lesson. So I have up Principles of Biomedical Science, Block 1A. Of course, the date will be the same if you're 1A, 2A, or 3A. If you're watching this in 1B because you want to work ahead, then your date will be Thursday, 3-4. So if I click from stream over to classwork, the first thing we'll do is open up the Monday 3-1 and the 3.2.5 lab journal. This should only take about 20 to 30 minutes if you work slowly. So I'm also going to do something that I have planned for the rest of today and all of class tomorrow, but I'll explain that in a separate video. So go ahead and open up the lab journal, which I already have open. This is called Medical Surge. Remember, we brought our hiker in and there was a big old storm coming, so we triaged the patients that were already in the ER, but they're anticipating a whole bunch of new patients because of the storm. So our goals: propose strategies for responding to disasters and large-scale health crises. And then we have the second goal of manage resources to plan and respond to a medical surge. You can see in parentheses, not happening. I spent 2 days trying to get this game to work in a remote setting, and all I got was a couple more gray hairs. So we'll do the first goal. The second one, not so much. All right. So what types of medical resources do hospitals need to treat patients? You guys know this, so take a few seconds. Sure, they need IVs, they need bandages, medications, yep. What else? Somebody's like, beds, beds. Of course, you're right. They do need beds and wheelchairs. And we could go on and on with this list. I know you all have a bunch of great ideas, but we're gonna keep it short. And we're going to define medical surge using our website here. And I'm looking over, I'm looking at this screen. So let's see. You can read the aftermath, the storm that hit, it blew the generators. So our medical surge, copy and paste. Control C. And again, a silver lining, I guess, to this whole pandemic thing is you're more familiar with these terms than you might otherwise have been. So medical surge happens when a whole bunch of new patients come into a facility, like all at once. And then you have to deal with surge capacity, which is a hospital's ability to handle more than its normal share of patients. Okay, so I just copied and pasted that. And if the internet is glitchy, I'll put this up. Okay. Other than a storm, what are some other potential causes of a medical surge? Well, I did just mention the global pandemic. What are some other natural disasters that you've heard of or that you can think of? Well, sure, hurricane, tornado, good one. What else? Blizzard, like in Texas. Yes, I heard somebody say that, even though I'm recording by myself. So, like the Texas, um, I'm going to say blizzard, but it wasn't really a blizzard. It just knocked their whole power grid offline and their ability to have clean water. Sure. Oh, look at that, blizzard. Thank you, Google Doc. There are lots of other ones you're naming that I'm not hearing because, again, recording this by myself. But you're right, lots of good ideas there. Okay. So let's look. What does managing key resources entail? This is where we do the game, but honestly, that game, it'd be great if this were a normal school year, but it isn't, and that game is just not going to happen. So let's take a look. And feel free, to pause me when you need to. Let's see. Surge response. Here we go. What does managing key resources entail? Here we go. Moving it around to where it's most useful, or anticipating what'll be most useful. There you go. So now is the time where we would play that game. Again, not happening. But let's take a look at flattening the curve. I know you've heard that phrase a lot lately. What exactly does that mean? It has to do with medical surges caused by this global pandemic. So if we scroll down past the game, not doing the game, I feel a little guilty because it's like a lot of this is playing that game, but it just, so here we go. Simple measures to flatten the curve. So here we go. You can see over time and number of cases, if no steps were taken, you can see that pretty soon the healthcare system capacity would be overloaded everywhere. And then you run into issues. So taking steps to flatten the curve, here we go, means to slow the spread of a disease, to not overwhelm hospitals with surges beyond their capacity to keep up. That's the whole point of social distancing and isolating, is so that we don't overwhelm Ascension or Aurora or Freighter, because then more people die. So the measures we've taken to help the healthcare system, by social distancing, quarantining, mask wearing, etc. We have slowed the spread of COVID-19 so we don't overwhelm the hospitals with surges. That's not to say some hospitals haven't been overwhelmed with surges. They certainly have, especially like here's Wisconsin, up in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, where my sister lives. They certainly did get overwhelmed because their hospitals are small and they had a large number of cases. All right. So there we go. We're already to the conclusion questions, which is why I have that other thing in here as well. So here we go. During a disaster, how might the efficient triage of patients help increase a hospital surge capacity? So remember, triage is sorting patients. So think of sorting patients into those 4 categories. So what emergent you have to deal with right away. Some urgent, you can't send them home. Semi-urgent and non-urgent. If a hospital is having a surge and somebody comes in classified as like non-urgent, go home and use common sense, then that frees up space in that hospital for somebody who really needs help, right? So triaging And sending patients home quickly will free up space in the hospital for people who are emergent and urgent. Remember, those are the two you have to deal with it now type categories. So by being able to triage patients and say, you know what, here's what you can do, please go home and do it there, you're freeing up space. It seems like probably a little bit heartless, but when you're dealing with emergencies on a large scale, you have to do what keeps the most people safe and alive. So explain how a hospital's disaster response plan might differ in a response to a different type of disaster, such as an earthquake, fire, or epidemic. Well, think of the different kinds of injuries that would come in those cases. So different injuries, that's the first thing that pops into my mind, will require different treatments. You wouldn't necessarily have a large amount of burn cream and gauze in the event of an earthquake or even in the event of an epidemic, but a fire you would. You probably wouldn't have a lot of respirators on hand for an earthquake. You'd have more tourniquets and casts and wheelchairs. But for an epidemic, we know that ventilators are pretty essential. So different treatments and different equipment. You'd also want to consider, is the fire happening right now? Is the earthquake happening right now? Epidemic right now? Like the epidemic we are dealing with, they expanded hospital capacity by temporarily setting up in like Miller Park or whatever they're calling it now, American something field, Miller Park. So like for an epidemic, hospitals can set up clinics, I'll call it a clinic, in existing building. Like they did in Miller Park. But if there's a fire, you wouldn't necessarily have time to set up a clinic in an existing building. You'd want to get people on the scene to treat people there. But in a fire or earthquake scenario, response time would not allow for extensive setup, which is what the game was supposed to show you. Okay? So there you go. Super quick, super easy. And we'll move on to the next thing, which is the project, but again, in a separate video. So feel free, to rewind me and pause me if you missed some of the answers, because I did move pretty quickly. And I hope that you don't need to use this, but maybe you do. All right.